This is George Fox, the son of Don Charles, the boxing trainer. He's currently 3-0. He's a heavyweight. And in this interview here with Pep Talk UK, he's talked about a fight against Alen Babic, and he's called it easy work. He thinks that he would have an easy time defeating Babic, and if that fight was to be made or offered to him, he would accept it in a heartbeat. Now, George Fox has sparred with a lot of people. I know that. He sparred with Derek Chisora. I think he sparred with Tyson Fury, maybe Dylan White. He sparred with a lot of people. But to my knowledge, please correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't have an extensive amateur career. Okay? And as I say, as a pro, he's 3-0. Now, if you look at George Fox's fights, and this is one of them here. I think this was his last fight, actually. Let's just check his record here. Yeah, it was. Against Alen Babic. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. He's a Polish heavyweight. And all George Fox's fights so far is 3 pro fights. They've all gone the distance against less than stellar opposition, as is the norm when a fighter is starting off their career. His first fight was against a fellow debutant. He won that on points over 4. Then he fought a journeyman who had 71 losses. He won that on points, and his last one was against this Polish opponent with 2 wins and 3 losses. So he looks like a journeyman in the making. And you can watch the fight here, as I say, on YouTube. Just type in the information there into the search box, and you'll find the fight. And looking at George Fox, he's quite smooth. You know, his movements are very fluid. So he's not a stiff, clunky looking heavyweight. But it was a little alarming to me to see a guy as limited as this Polish fighter being able to get so close to George Fox, pin him on the ropes so easily within the opening seconds of the fight. And throughout the fight, whenever this guy decides to make a charge forward, it's usually a successful charge, because he manages, as I say, to pin George Fox on the ropes, where he gets shots off, and he does catch George Fox with regularity. I mean, he's not getting caught particularly clean most of the time, but shots are getting through. So if that's happening against such a limited pressure fighter as this guy, how would he fare against Alen Babic, who I'm going to just flat out say is much better than this gentleman right here? Alen Babic has a much more relentless style. And I know George Fox says he sparred with Chisora, and he claims that this style, pressure fighter style, is the easiest for him to deal with. And he just finds it a walk in the park. I think Alen Babic, I strongly suspect, hits a lot harder than this guy. Even though this guy is heavier than Babic by about 10 or 13 pounds, and maybe more, I suspect Babic hits a lot harder than this guy, is more relentless, probably has better head movement. I don't know what this guy's amateur background was, but Alen Babic is reputed to have something like, 100 amateur fights. There are varying reports in terms of how many amateur fights he actually had, but he did have an extensive amateur background. He wasn't a well-renowned international amateur, Alen Babic, and that's kind of what I was alluding to in previous videos about Babic. He wasn't one of these guys like a Povetkin or whatever, notorious international amateur superstar, basically. That's what Povetkin was. Babic wasn't like that. He was known domestically in his country and maybe a little bit regionally, but he wasn't a big international amateur. So be that as it may, I still believe that he had much more of an extensive amateur background than this guy. I mean, we can have a look if BoxRec have got any information on this individual. And in fact, wow, look at that. Kubek's last fight after George Fox, I didn't realize this, he was stopped in 2 rounds. Okay, he was down and stopped in 2 rounds against Cash Ali. So the fact that George Fox went the distance with this guy, I mean, what does that say about George Fox's punching power? Because he was loading up and hitting this guy with shots, and he wasn't able to get him out of there. So, interesting. Anyway, getting back to this individual here. Let's go to the wiki, see if we can access an amateur record. Nope, it's only got pro record on there. So from what I've seen of George Fox so far, he doesn't appear to be a devastating puncher. He's certainly not a prolific puncher. As I say, 3-0 with no KOs as of yet. Fought this guy, went the distance when this guy actually got dropped and stopped by Cash Ali. And he was able to pin George Fox on the ropes with relative ease and get shots off on a regular basis throughout the fight. I think George Fox, at a bare minimum, would have a tough time against Alen Babic. Even if he managed to win the fight, and we don't know what Alen Babic's stamina is like over the course of, let's say, a 10-round fight, even an 8-round fight, we don't know. So even if George Fox was able to ride out the storm and maybe outbox Babic, I don't think it will be easy. So the stuff that George Fox is currently saying, I mean, at the end of the day, proof is in the pudding. So perhaps he'll prove me wrong, but I cannot envision a scenario, well, a realistic scenario. I can envision a scenario, but I don't think it's likely, okay, that George Fox can defeat Alen Babic with any kind of comfort or ease. I think that would be a very, very tough fight for him. I know Alen Babic is small, but I think people kind of put a bit too much stock in the size of some heavyweights. At the elite level, right, size is going to matter more because generally speaking, the higher you go up in the heavyweight division, the more skilled the fighters are, right? But when you come down to the lower levels of the heavyweight division, size is not going to matter as much because you could have a guy with way more skill who's small going up against the guy who's much bigger but less skillful. You understand? Now, some people might say that's not the case with George Fox and Babic. Fox looks more skilled. Well, Fox looks fluid, okay? Doesn't necessarily mean skilled. And what I mean by that is a guy like this Polish journeyman was able to close George Fox down easily, pin him on the ropes and get shots off. How skilled can Fox possibly be if that is happening? Do you understand? Sometimes certain fighters look, you know, the way they move and the way they shape up and their stance, it looks like they're skillful. But when it actually comes to the crunch, they're not able to avoid being trapped on the ropes. They're not able to avoid getting hit with shots. Do you understand what I'm saying? Somebody might look like they have a Tyson Fury-esque defense, but you won't know if it's actually as good as Tyson Fury's defense until that defense is put to the test and people actually start throwing shots. And from what I've seen of George Fox, I mean, look, maybe he was just messing around in this fight. Maybe he was just working on certain things, wasn't taking it too seriously. Maybe if he'd wanted to, he could have stayed in the middle of the ring more. And perhaps it was a small ring for him. I don't know. But yeah, it just didn't look good if he's talking about fighting an Alen Babic. The fact that he was getting pinned on a rope so often, because I'm telling you now, Babic is going to do a lot more damage than this guy if he pins George Fox on the ropes. So anyway, let's see if there's any legs in that fight. Alen Babic versus George Fox. It's interesting now that Babic has made a little bit of a name for himself. I guess mostly because of his persona, but also the way he followed up with an exciting performance against Shondell Winters. And he's gaining this cult following in the UK. Now, as a result of that, you're having all these heavyweights calling him out. You know, you have George Fox. I think there was, I forget, is it Adelaide? I think it's Adelaide, his surname, who's a young heavyweight prospect that boxes under the Queensbury banner on BT Sport. So there's a couple guys who call him out. And I think there are others as well who have called out Alen Babic. So it's interesting. There's a lot of people now that want to work. Let's see what Babic, his manager, Dylan White, and promoter Eddie Hearn decide to do. You know, and actually, when I say promoter Eddie Hearn, I'm not sure if Babic is actually signed to Eddie Hearn. I know he's fought on several Matchroom shows, but I can't remember if he's actually got a promotional deal with Matchroom. He may just have the managerial deal with Dylan White. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about George Fox calling out Alen Babic. Do you think that that's a fight that could get made? And if not, why not? And if it did get made, how do you see the fight playing out? Would you be picking George Fox or would you be picking Alen Babic? I mean, I can see the physical advantages that George Fox has over Alen Babic. And, he does appear to have a relaxed, fluid kind of style where he can pop a jab from long range. I'm not too convinced by his ability to maintain range, because when you have a pressure fighter that hits really hard, especially at heavyweight, you don't want to allow him to pin you on the ropes like this, because that's where he's going to do the most damage, because you are now a stationary target. When he starts wailing away, he's going to be getting full force into his punches. If you're in the middle of the ring and you're messing with the range and he tries to throw a left hook, you might be able to move away and take the sting off the shot or make the shot miss completely. You understand what I'm saying? And a lot of fighters aren't really able to get full power on the shots when they're in the middle of the ring. Now, some fighters can, but a lot of fighters, particularly pressure fighters, they need to set themselves. Okay, some fighters can set themselves quicker than others, but a lot of pressure fighters, they need to set themselves, and that might take a second or two to really dig their toes into the canvas and start cranking those hooks and land with full power. And that's why with a lot of those pressure fighters, they like to pin you on the ropes. For one, you're not going to move anywhere. And for two, they can get more power on the shots because they can set themselves better, knowing that you're not going to be able to move out of the way very quickly. Yeah. And so when a guy like George Fox is giving you that, here I am, I'm sitting on the ropes for you. I don't know, man. Fox might find that Alen Babic hits harder than he realized, and he might find that the damage Babic can inflict on him in a situation like this makes staying on the ropes not a very viable strategy. And then we're going to see whether George Fox can actually keep it in the middle of the ring, move around, and how long he can do that for. He's a big man. I don't know how tall George Fox is exactly, but he's very tall. I mean, he must be at least 6'7". And in terms of his weight, let's go to his weight here. He's over 250 pounds. So over 250, at least 6'7". I don't know how much this guy can move over the course of 10 rounds. But then again, there are questions about Babic, as I've said before, how long he can keep up his pressure. According to him, he can do it for 10 rounds, no problem. And at the weight Alen Babic is 6 pounds or something. He's just over cruiserweight. Maybe he can keep it up all night long. I mean, it's like Joe Frazier. He was around the size of Alen Babic. Very similar size fighters. And Frazier could just throw and throw and throw all night for 15 rounds. He was just like a dynamo, Frazier, just non-stop. So I'm not saying Alen Babic is as good as Joe Frazier, but what I'm saying is that a small heavyweight like that, it's not unprecedented for him to be able to throw non-stop shots over the entire duration of a fight, 10 rounds, 12 rounds. That's not unprecedented. Some small guys like that because they don't have the bulk of most heavyweights. They don't weigh 250 pounds or whatever. Even Derek Chisora, right? He's a come forward pressure fighter, but he weighs a lot. Derek Chisora's weighed, from the 240s through to the 250, 260. He's a big, hefty man. That is not, that's not the kind of weight that you can lug around for 12 rounds while keeping up a very high work rate, a Joe Frazier level work rate. In order to keep up a Joe Frazier level work rate as a pressure fighter, you're probably going to have to be a similar kind of weight to Joe Frazier. Generally speaking, the heavier guys are, the lower their work rate is. There are some exceptions, but generally that's how it goes. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about all the points I've raised in this video and what you think about George Fox calling out Alen Babic, the Savage. Let me know, people. It's happening. I'm out.